Great record here, 11-3 against Kevin Jones playing Jeskai Stoneblade. We get ready for round number 15, a very, very important one here from Worcester, as Jones is going to start things off with a Tundra.
Oh, no. I'll tell you something here. If this match goes to time, you are not going to see any end-of-match concessions
No,
here.
you won't.
No, you won't.
Absolutely not. You will see a draw and both players get knocked out. Averting Catacombs here, as Merriam is on 6 cards to start things off. That's a Deathrite Shaman. We'll see what land Ross wants to get with his Verdant Catacombs. He'll go with a Tropical Island. These two players do play in the same area as well. I know that they played in an IQ last weekend in Connecticut, and actually Kevin is the one who knocked Ross out of top 8 contention. So they do run into each other in the same area here in the Northeast. Scalding Tarn is land number 2 here for Jones. He's going to play a Brainstorm. See if Ross has any interest in maybe countering this. I didn't think that he would, and he will not. So 3 cards coming. Of course, 2 will go back, and Jones already has the fetch line in play, so it'll be a good Brainstorm.
Typically, I like the Stoneblade side of these matchups. Good removal. Stoneforge Mystic is a very challenging threat. Batterskull entering play is close to game over for Sultai Delver.
Very challenging to beat.
They're cards that contain the board, basically just Abrupt Decay, and so impact permanents greater than 3 mana. They're very, very good against this deck, and Batterskull is one of the best ones in Legacy.
Ross does have some unique cards to be able to deal with Stoneforge Mystic and Disfigure and Liliana the Veil, 2 cards that have not been terribly popular this weekend. Haven't seen much of them outside of Gerard Fabiano's Sultai control deck. So we'll see what kind of role those cards play in this particular matchup, and then sideboarding will certainly get interesting, but we will get to that once game 1 is over. Tundra in play here for Jones off of Scalding Tarn.
True Name Nemesis, another card in Kevin's deck. Ross does have 2 copies of Liliana the Veil as a potential answer, but that's another very troublesome card for Ross if Kevin's able to sneak it into play.
Now here's the Swords to take care of the Deathrite Shaman. Ross is going to daze there. Merriam will draw a card. Needs that Deathrite. Picked up a Wasteland for the turn. He will Wasteland. Now he'll just pass the turn back. Not even willing to attack with the Deathrite Shaman. Not willing to do anything with the Deathrite Shaman. Very notable. If you're Kevin, you have to pick up on something like a Spell Pierce here.
Yeah, got something to do with that mana.
Merriam does have 3 copies of Spell Pierce in the deck. Jones with just a Tundra and a passing of the turn. That's an Underground Sea. Merriam will pass the turn back. Still representing Spell Pierce and a Deathrite Shaman activation. Just informed now that David Long, Paul Lynch did draw at table number 2. That might be a safe draw, might not be.
Yeah.
I think it's relatively safe for David. It's unclear if it's safe for Paul. The only person that we know draws are safe for are Andrew Jessup and Michael Derzo, and we know they shook hands.
And definitely safe for David. It's Paul that it's not super clear.
Yeah. Swords Plowshare is going to go after Deathrite Shaman here on Merriam's upkeep. Looks like we'll have Ross activate the Deathrite Shaman. Get a little bit out of it on the way out the door. Merriam will draw a card. Force of Will is what he's found. Tropical Island is the play. Pass that turn back. Slow start here for both players.
But that favors Kevin much better as the game progresses.
As Kevin is the one with a card like Dig Through Time in his deck, which he just drew.
Welcome to round 6.
Merriam will draw.
50 minutes. You may begin.
No threat on the table yet here for Ross. We haven't even seen any manipulation yet. But here's a Misty Rainforest, so he'll sacrifice that, go down to 19. See what land he wants to search up. He'll go with an Underground Sea. Perhaps it's time for a Tarmogoyf. It'd actually be a Tassiger. We have seen this card be really good and pretty bad in some spots this weekend, too, due to Caracas.
That's been a big part of it. Also, these decks just not getting to 4 mana has been a big problem, too. Tassiger's activated power in Standard and Modern come up all the time as the formats are slightly slower. Here in Legacy, a little bit tougher.
This figure is going to take care of Vendilion Click. You'll see the hand here for Merriam. A Force Will, a Spell Pierce, and a Polluted Delta.
And True Name in Kevin's hand. He can put Force Will on the bottom and just go for it.
Yep.
Still susceptible to Liliana the Veil off the top from Ross, but this appears to be a reasonable opening to go for it.
Kevin will take Force of Will. Mystery card coming here from Merriam. We didn't get a look. Neither did Kevin. There is True Nemesis. Did Merriam peel a Daze? Force of Will? The answer is no. So let's see if he can find a card like Liliana now. Doesn't look like he can.
And it has to be Liliana. There's nothing else.
Here's Ponder. Some decent options there for Merriam. Looks like another Ponder and a Brainstorm. Take a draw. There's a Polluted Delta. That's a turn back. Merriam not going to panic in this situation. True Name is a very, very good card, obviously. And something he's going to have to deal with. But for right now, True Nemesis is probably going to be hanging back on defense.
It's not a big threat for Ross right now, as long as Kevin doesn't find a piece of equipment or a second copy of True Name Nemesis. Then Ross kind of has to speed up. For the time being, this is just a blocker.
A Brainstorm. We'll draw 3 cards, and of course 2 will have to go back. Supreme Verdict among the options here for Jones. As you mentioned, though, the longer we go and the more on balance Kevin is, the better things are for him. It's when he's off balance and Ross is coming from multiple angles, you're messing with lands, that's where things get tough.
Yep. Kevin can be vulnerable to Wasteland. He can just get choked with a lot of expensive stuff. Ross plays a more efficient game in the earlier turns, but as things proceed, Kevin just makes his land drops, and his cards, pound for pound, are a lot better than Ross's.
Scalding Tarn. Passing of the turn. Merriam will start with a Brainstorm, given the Polluted Delta in play. It looks to be a good Brainstorm. We'll see if it does resolve, and it will. So he'll draw 3 cards. 2, of course, will be going back.
Players in the Modern Premier IQ. Your pairings are now online and are momentarily headed out to the pairings
Sacrifice a
course.
Polluted Delta.
Please check your pairings and move quickly to your seats.
Another Tropical Island here. 1 Bayou hanging out in Ross's deck, too. To go on 400 round season, 2 Tropical Islands. Mana does not look to be a problem in this game.
Sometimes the Sultai Delver decks can have slightly sketchy mana, especially if they're packing things like Hymn to Torak, but for the most part, things work just fine.
Here's a Ponder. Ross not looking what he sees, so he'll shuffle. Jones waiting patiently.
Shuffle, 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 shuffle.
It's the Shuffle Truffle. It's Legacy, man. Mystery card coming. Still on the hunt for Liliana the Veil. 2 outs to the True Nemesis. Merriam will pass the turn back.
Or potentially just overpowering Kevin with card advantage. As long as we're sitting here like this, Ross kind of has the better end of it because he can eventually start activating Tassiger to good effect. Now, on a strategic level, it's not a good spot for Ross to be in. Kevin's deck is more powerful. Ross needs to get something going, but as you mentioned before, no need for Ross to panic just yet. He can sit around, sculpt his hand. If he finds Liliana, great, but he can wait a little bit longer at least.
Kevin going to start with the Ponder. So he'll look at 3 cards. Force of Will among them. That card's going to stay on top. Supreme Verdict the draw. Supreme Verdict, a nice break in case of emergency button here for Kevin.
Yeah, he can allow Ross to build up a board to overpower Trinity Nemesis and then clean it all up.
Modern players who are not in your seats yet, you should be moving.
Some builds of
towards
Sultai Delver, you'll find
at this
Thoughtseize or
time.
Hypnotoric. You're not going to find any of that in the
Players
Ross's
who
deck,
are in
however.
your seats, if you do not yet
You'll
have
find
an
the
opponent, please raise
typical
your
12
hand
creatures
and
in Delver,
find their
Deathrite, and
seats.
Tarmogoyf, along with the Singleton Tassiger that's in play. Brainstorm, Ponder, Forcible Days, those are all 4s. Of course, 4 Abrupt Decays, 2, and then you've got 2 Disfigures, 2 Lilianas, and 3 Spell Pierces. So no discard here.
Often find that stuff hanging out in the sideboard. 2 Disfigures, very versatile removal spells, and Legacy has most of the marquee creatures are 2 toughness.
Yeah, Ross found that at the Season 1 Invitational, he liked that card quite a bit. His Wasteland's going to go after Tundra. Jones searching of a basic island with a Scalding Tarn. Looks like Jones is setting up for a little dig through time action, perhaps. That seems like a card that we'll have a little fight over. It's a very powerful one, after all. This is all on Kevin's upkeep.
Players in the Modern PIQ, you should be in your seats at this time.
Here's a
We
Forcible
are
removing
moving
Spell
into your
Pierce.
5th round. You have 50 minutes. You may begin.
Force the Will back. Removing Spell Snare. Does Ross have any way to fight back here?
This feels like a curious spell for Kevin to be pushing through at this point, so I'm not exactly sure what he's on the hunt for. And that Forcible gives him a great deal of protection against Liliana Veil if that happens to show up. I guess Kevin doesn't necessarily know if Liliana's in Ross's main deck, but I'm not sure exactly what's the card he's looking for.
The thought process here may be that, hey, good card is good.
It's true. I mean, Dig Through Time is obviously powerful to resolve, but usually you only see a Forcible Will on the way back when there's something very particular the person's looking for.
We are stopping the game here for a moment. I think it's unclear if Kevin did delve for his Dig Through Time. This guy has 2 cards in his hand. We'll see what's going on here for sure.
And it is significant what he chooses to exile here because he has Snapcaster Mage in his deck.
Indeed.
So it's not like, oh, any of the 6 cards, they're all the same thing here.
And it looks like he's already seen some cards from the Dig Through Time as well.
And on top of that, you see his graveyard right there. There's 3 lands in there, and the rest are spells.
Yeah.
So the Snapcaster Mage, in theory, is informed by the cards he looked at, et cetera, et cetera. It's possible that could result in something significant, but we're going to have to wait and see what the judge rules.
Yeah, it looks like he got a little ahead of himself, but it felt truthfully as though an honest mistake there, and I think Ross kind of noticed it too when he was starting to resolve Dig Through Time. So
Right, because Kevin's casting Force of Will, Ross is Force of Willing back. Kevin Force of Will's back. Then you start resolving. It's very easy to lose track of the small things that are going on there. But because of the Snapcaster Mages in Kevin's deck, what he chooses to exile in that spot is relevant. So
certainly,
we'll have to wait and see.
Now, as far as other matches that are taking place in this particular round, just want to do a quick table pairing. Table 1 was Andrew Jessup and Michael Derzo. That's Elves versus Death and Taxes. Both players are 36 points, so they shook hands. They're getting ready for top 8. David Long with Lands at table 2 with 36 points against Paul Lynch playing Grixis Delver. We saw him a little bit earlier, more of a Grixis control shell, honestly. They shook hands as well. Joe Spanier is playing Infect right now against Zachary Cook, who is playing Joe Spanier is playing Miracle. Zachary Cook is playing Infect. So we actually saw Zachary, last time we were here, make top 8. So we'll see if he can do that again against Spanier, who is playing a Miracles deck. And then Kevin Jones, Ross Merriam, well, we're watching them right now as Kevin is resolving a Dig Through Time. There's the potential for Joe Lissette to make top 8 as well, as he's playing against Sam Rokas in a Miracles mirror match, and that's our backup match. So Dig Through Time being resolved here by Kevin.
Players, if you're in the venue, Andrew Jessup, Michael Dirkso,
He's found 2.
David Long,
The other 5 will go to the
Paul
bottom.
Lynch. Please come to the stage. Kevin may be trying for another Tree Nemesis. Remember that Dig Through Time was on his upkeep.
all of that action happened because of a wasteland. And the ruling there by the head judge was just a game rules violation. They unwound the game state, got things to where they should be. Then Kevin resolved his day through time, and now we are where we are. Things get a lot tougher now.
The second copy makes it very challenging,
Here's a Tasker activation.
if it resolves.
Delver of Secrets and Abrupt Decay are the cards that are turned over. Abrupt Decay is the card that is given. Train Nemesis is in. Now the second one's in. The first one can start getting in the red zone.
And now there's a lot of pressure on Ross to find Liliana pronto just to get the game back to parity.
Well, he's drawing a Brainstorm, so it's not a bad start. Ponder has been found here. A couple of cards will have to go back for Merriam. But he's in some trouble right now. Gonna sacrifice a Delta, go down to 13. Shuffle the old deck. We might see a Ponder Liliana, the bottom card of the deck. Ross is looking for one of those.
And these X and Legacy get a lot of looks at it with the cantrips.
It's certainly nice to have outs to be available.
Magic players.
Some people are just dead to Tree Nemesis, as we saw yesterday.
Please come to the stage.
Nope, shuffle away, doesn't like it.
And there's no hesitation from Ross because he knows the scope of the situation right now. It's Liliana the Veil or bust. He cannot even wait that long because he's going to be taking a lot of damage. And the Liliana's not going to stick beyond one turn because Kevin can simply finish off Liliana with the remaining True Name Nemesis.
Verdant Catacombs was the mystery draw for Ponder. All Merriam can do is pass the turn back. His Tasker can't attack, obviously, because the True Name is on defense. Jones going to play an Arid Mesa for the turn. Jones still with Supreme Verdict, and he also has Jace the Mind Sculptor in hand. Jones will come into the red zone here for 3. See if he does try to cast the Jace or not. And he will not. Just pass the turn back over to Merriam. Merriam picked up an Abrupt Decay from that Tasker activation. He has a Wasteland in hand now. But the one card he doesn't have at this point is Liliana the Veil. There is the Wasteland. He'll pass the turn back. Jones will draw. Picked up a copy of Ponder for the turn. Looks like he's going to start there using his basic island. 3 cards coming here for Kevin. He's happy enough. He'll keep him. Snapcaster Mage the find.
Can't go wrong there.
Yeah, hard to pass it up, right? Getting aggressive with both. Wants to make it a 2-turn game. Smart.
Magic players, if you would like to play in our last scheduled event today.
Merriam down to 4. We'll get a Tasker activation, a Brainstorm in a daze. We'll also get one of these cards back.
This is your last call to register. If you'd like to play some...
A lot of stuff down there in the graveyard, but something like a Disfigure or a Daze, they don't matter all that much.
Yeah, there's a lot of dead weight in there.
Once again, our Modern Challenge, last call for registration.
Delver Secrets with the draw, and there will be a concession. Kevin Jones is going to win game number 1 here over Ross Merriam. Both players are going to get sideboarded and shuffled up for game 2 very quickly. There's about 30 minutes left. A small time extension will be granted, I imagine, because of the judge ruling, so we'll make sure that our clock is updated for our viewers at home. And we'll take a look at the sideboard here with Merriam. He's got a Flusterstorm and a Tree Nemesis, a Vendilion Click and a Jace the Mind Sculptor, 3 Thoughtseize, 1 Dismember, 1 Sylvan Library, 2 Golgari Charms, 1 Grafdigger's Cage, 2 Nile Spellbombs, and a Pith Needle. Certainly nice to have answers to Tree Nemesis thanks to the Golgari Charms.
Yeah, 2 copies of Golgari Charm have got to come in here. I think Ross can also bring in his own copy of True Name Nemesis and Vendilion Click. A little awkward with the Golgari Charms, but I think it's still fine. The game's going to be going on for a long time, and Ross just needs powerful threats and flexible answers to the stuff that Kevin is doing. I'm not a huge fan of the discard in this matchup because it's a game that can go on for a very long time. Brainstorm's involved. I think Thoughtseize is powerful in the opening hand, but not really that good beyond that. But I do like the 1 Jace the Mind Sculptor in this matchup.
Taking a look at Kevin's sideboard, he's got 2 Blood Moons, 2 Meddling Mages, 2 Rest in Peace, 2 Red Elemental Blast, 2 Flusterstorm, the Nahiri, the Lithomancer, the Sword of Feast and Famine, a Wear Tear, a Pyroblast, and a Grafdigger's Cage. Those Blood Moons, pretty scary stuff there.
Blood Moon is lights out for Ross. He has no basic lands in his deck. He does have True Name Nemesis to generate mana with, but Kevin can probably keep those cards contained with Swords of Plowshares and Lightning Bolt. I think the 2 copies of Rest in Peace are solid here, as Ross's deck with Tassiger, Tarmogoyf, Deathrite Shaman really laying on the graveyard quite a bit to get something going. I think Sword of Feast and Famine is solid here. Ross's deck is, black and green. The Sword Feasting Man can do some pretty good work there.
Yes.
And I think the Red Blast and Flushy Storms were also fine.
A lot of options here for both players, so we'll see how they opt to sideboard. What's going to be interesting, too, is what they choose to sideboard out. It's easy to figure out what cards to sideboard in, but what to take out of the deck is certainly difficult, so should be fun to watch. Quick update for you guys on one of our matches. Looks like Zach Hook did take care of Joe Spanier. Given the matchup, and we've seen Zach before, he's playing Infect. He's playing against Miracles, and well, we've seen how that goes.
Amoth Nexus is very, very hard for Miracles to beat.
Yes, it is. So for our Infect fans out there, it's not Tom Ross that'll be doing it. It'll be Zach Cook. So congratulations to him. And we will highlight the race yet again here for Season 2 in that leaderboard. Kevin Jones is right on the top of it, as he has been all weekend long, and he certainly made the most of this weekend here in Worcester. The Legacy World Champion from Eternal Weekend, he's got 219 Open Series points. Ross just a little bit behind it with 212, and we can't forget that Joe Lissette's playing for top 8 right now too with 215.
But that gap opens up quite a bit, Kevin versus Ross here, if Kevin wins this match. Because he's in the top 8. Ross maybe is in the top 16, probably in the top 32. And the gulf in points there, even if Kevin loses in the top 8, is pretty significant, especially given that Kevin already has a lead. Kevin goes on to win the whole thing. Ross might be done going into Columbus.
Yeah, we're talking 25 Open Series points then, and of course $5,000, so a hefty prize as well. And if he only makes the top 8, 10 Open Series points is certainly nice, but looking to make a deep run to the top 4, that's where things certainly do shake up in a finals appearance too. So we can't forget about Joe, even though he's on the backup feature match. He's ahead of Ross, behind Kevin. Pretty important that he wins that match over Sam Raucus. Though Sam, former Open Series champion with Miracles, and if you remember that Open Series in Syracuse last year, he won with Miracles very quickly.
No slops for that deck.
Yes.
I mean, I know Joe is our highest profile Miracles player on the Open Series, but definitely some other people out there with some chops.
And Joe is currently up a game right now. Better get moving and grooving there, Joe. Couple draws underneath his belt. That'll happen with Miracles, though. Noah Walker against Ed D'Amico. Those players are playing for top 8 here. Both of them have Open Series top 8s. D'Amico, a Legacy top 8 with Ely Cassis' Grixis deck many moons ago. Walker we saw a couple weeks ago when we were in Providence. He top 8 with Jeskai Aggro and Standard. And then we have Lloyd Kurth, a former Legacy Open champion with Charlotte Sultai, playing for top 8 here. So some named players at the top of the standings, but Andrew Jessup, Michael Derzo, David Long, and Zachary Cook already look to be in. So Jessup with Elves, Derzo with Death and Taxes, Long with Lands, and Cook with Infect. 4 different decks. Not a surprise given the format.
Yeah, and we know some of those matchups can be a little bit rough potentially that we already have lined up. We know about the Elves versus Death and Taxes matchup, for example, being one of the more lopsided matchups in Legacy.
Depends who you ask.
I suppose that's true. We've seen some upsets there before.
We have with the gentleman to your left.
On the bad end of it.
That's correct. Dave Shields versus Ross Merriam last year in Providence, oddly enough, in the summer, when Ross Merriam was 1 game away from going back-to-back and tying Jerry Thompson's record. Came up a little short then, unfortunately, for Merriam, but he's bounced back nicely. Number 4 on our Season 2 leaderboard is Jones is going to take a mulligan. And that win in Columbus has certainly helped propel him into the position he's in right now.
Yes.
Excuse me, in Cleveland. Really impressive display with Ban Heroic that weekend, a deck that he had just picked up for the first time.
A deck that has picked up surprisingly little traction in Standard, given some of the more high-profile finishes with it. Tom Ross in Syracuse, top-8ing that tournament in what felt like exceptionally easy fashion. Ross picking up the trophy in Cleveland with it, but we still don't see a ton of it in the Open Series.
Jones going to take a look at 6 cards. He's going to keep. We're underway. About 29 minutes left to go as Ross is going to start with a Ponder. Look at an Underground Sea. Time is certainly very important here. If these players draw, they are both going to miss top 8.
Yeah, and also neither player is conceding.
Yeah.
No one is trying to do the other any favors in this match.
Ponder will resolve. Merriam will take a look at the top 3. See if he likes what he sees.
Attention Legacy Challenge players. The pairings for your next round are going up.
Looks like he's going to keep it with Ponder. Delver secrets the draw.
Legacy Challenge players.
Jones will start off with a Tundra. He'll pass the turn back over to Merriam. Merriam with land number 2. Delver secrets number 1. Pass the turn back over to Jones. Jones will draw. Does have a Brainstorm in hand. Looks like he just drew a Scalding Tarn for the turn. There is the Tarn. Checking with Delver. It's a hit. Thought Seize. It's almost like Ross knew that was there. That Delver will flip.
Ross decided to bring in the discard here.
Not too surprising, at least in my opinion. I do agree with you. I think the longer it goes, that's pretty bad news for Merriam, but I think discard can maybe shorten the game a little bit.
Early on, it's going to be good.
Yeah. When he draws it late, it's going to be pretty bad. There's a Brainstorm. Ross is going to sacrifice blue to Delta in response. Looks like we might have a Spell Pierce to try to go after that. Of course, Kevin wants to try to hide cards. But Ross is going to try to stop him from doing that. Going to get a Tropical Island, Spell Pierce the Brainstorm. That happens. Now Thoughtseize happens. Rest in Peace, Counterspell. Dig Through Time, Tree Nemesis, and a Spell Snare. Pretty clunky hand here from Jones.
Yep. And Spell Snare is kind of much to do about nothing in this matchup. There are not a lot of big hits. It's basically Tarmogoyf.
Tarmogoyf and potential sideboard cards. I think that's where actually Spell Snare gets a little bit better. A card like Algari Charm, for example.
Sure.
Great card to be Spell Snaring. Sylvan Library as well. I do think that, Spell Snare, it depends how many Kevin has after sideboard. Maybe he only has one in his deck, and I think that's acceptable. It's certainly not the counterspell that Spell Pierce is.
Right. It's a little overlappy here with the Rest in Peace because Ross's Tarmogoyf is already kind of shut off from two angles.
Mm-hmm. Well, Ross wants to take care of that Rest in Peace. Jones is going to untap. He'll take a draw step here. Picked up another land in Arid Mesa.
Definitely a display of strength there from Ross by saying you get to keep True Name Nemesis.
Yeah, it's really telling, isn't it?
Implies that he has an answer or that he feels he can just race.
Jones not willing to test the waters. Just going to pass the turn back after playing the land. Merriam picked up a copy of Underground Sea. In for 3 is going to come. Jones going to go down to 14. Tarmogoyf in Merriam's hand here, but he knows about the Spell Snare. And oddly enough, looks like Ross isn't even going to play the land.
Modern
Interesting play there from Merriam.
players. Your pairings are going up.
Jones going to start by sacrificing Scalding Tarn. You saw the way he did that. Curious if Merriam has a card like Stifle in his deck.
Your pairings are up on
Interesting
blue
to see him
paper.
making no move there to play the land.
Pairings board.
I mean, the more that Ross says go and doesn't play a land, the more it implies, well, of course, my hand's all action.
Mm-hmm.
And if he's trying to
This is
freeze
your
Kevin up a
reminder.
little bit,
You have not
maybe it's worth
redeemed
it.
your voucher for a play mat.
That's what it feels like it's about. Maybe freeze him up a little bit. Maybe have a card to put back to the Brainstorm if he draws one.
And no Brainstorm right now. I think he's got a Ponder in his hand.
Yep. And Kevin certainly does as he's casting one. Merriam not going to fight over that. So Kevin, of course, gets to look at 3 cards. We'll see if he wants to keep them or not. Looks like he's found a configuration he's happy with. Swords of Plowshare is the draw. He'll pass the turn back over to Merriam. Merriam will draw a card. Delver's coming. Delver's hitting. Merriam's draw was a Delver this turn. Curious if he wants to play this one or not. He does not. He doesn't want to play the land either.
Yep. And I think he's just trying to freeze Kevin up here.
Thoughts on this?
I'm fine with it. I mean, casting the second copy of Delver of Secrets does risk Supreme Verdict. Potentially some other things as well. And Kevin hasn't done anything yet, so, I mean, make him act first. If he's going to go along with this, then why break it up?
Kevin sacrificed that Arid Mesa. He goes down to 9. There's land number 4. It's a Flooded Strand. Looks like we'll see a Source of Plowshares. Not just yet. Merriam going to draw. Kevin's going to cast it on the upkeep. Curious if Merriam wants to defend here. He does have a Force of Will. And the plan might be just to defend this one threat.
With another Delver in hand, I don't think he's going to push too hard. I think the counterfight he wants to engage in is one where he feels like he's getting good value, not necessarily trying to preserve this one Delver. If he feels like he can get a spot here where he says, he gets to say, Spell Pierce a counterspell, he senses that that's the way the counterspell fight's going to go, then I think it's worth picking a fight. But otherwise, I think he's content to just let that go.
He finally played the land. Now he's going to go with Liliana. Wants to start going after the grip now. Kevin's got that counterspell that Merriam knows about, so here is counterspell. Force of Will, removing Ponder. So Force of Will resolve. Liliana's going to be moving up here. We'll see if Merriam wants to discard. He's got that Tarmogoyf ready.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm looking for Brian Linane.
Yep, and Kevin's going to discard the spells there, so.
Please report to 256. Once again, Brian
Interesting
Linane.
interaction there.
Your event is
Jones will
ready.
draw. We know he's got True Nemesis in his hand, but Liliana's on the table. That's the answer to that card that Merriam was looking for last game that he couldn't find. Jones does have 3 cards in hand. Let's make it 2.
Standard challenge players. Your next round pairings are up. Once again, standard challenge. Next round pairings.
Jones going to start by sacrificing a Flooded Strand. He'll go down to 8, get a land out of his deck. We'll see which non-basic it'll be. It'll actually just be a basic. It'll be a second island. Looks like a dig through time here.
Kevin makes sure to take care of the delving up front here.
Don't want to have that issue again. There is dig through time. Does Merriam have Force of Will plus blue card again? Does he want a Force of Will plus blue card this?
I feel like you want to force a will here just because Ross is trying to get into an empty-handed position with Liliana in play.
There is Force of Will plus blue card. So you see the patience here from Merriam. Did not play the other Delver, never cast the Ponder. Was looking to get blue cards. Here's True Name Nemesis. That's going to die to Liliana, you have to imagine.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin gets to decide if he loses the True Name Nemesis to a +1 or a -2,
Yep.
so it's fine to cast, but...
There's a Delta. Both players are empty-handed. Let's see how we do off the top of the deck here for Kevin Jones.
They're empty-handed, but Ross has Diabolic Edict plus already in play.
Indeed. Jones will draw. Umezawa's Jite. Merriam will draw. Tarmogoyf. Take it up, move it back. For Kevin. That's something. Council's Judgment.
Good answer.
Not bad at all. Let's go back to Ross. Tarmogoyf. Take it up. Here we go. For Kevin. See how he did.
Looks like something. I mean, if it's a land, you just put it into play.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you signed up
Hey, he's
for
reaching around the grave.
pod number 5, your event is ready
Might be a
to
dig
begin.
through time.
Please meet at the stage.
Could be a Snapcaster Mage.
Commander pod number 5, your event is
It
ready.
is a Snapcaster
Please
Mage.
meet at the stage.
Oh, these guys are throwing haymakers at each other. Jeez. And he's actually going to go dig through time route. Okay. Could have maybe gone to Council's Judgment. Some other options, but he's decided to go super big here with dig.
Yep. Well, what I like about this is it kind of squeezes Ross to use the Liliana in 2 different directions. If he just gets Council's Judgment and kills the Tarmogoyf, Ross goes, okay, untap, edict you, now we're back in the same spot. This might give Kevin the tools to power past Liliana.
That's the big one right there. Source of Plowshares. I think that's exactly the card he was looking for here. Source of Plowshares plus X.
Because of Umezawa's Jite, it's very important for Ross to kill Kevin's creatures immediately. And because of that, it's very valuable for Kevin to be drawing cards because that will allow him to potentially overpower the plus power on Liliana.
There's the swords. Merriam will gain some life, pass the turn back, and Ross keep top decking. He'll tick down, take care of Snapcaster, play Misty Rainforest, pass that turn back over to Jones. Jones will draw. Jones is drawn. A lightning bolt off of the dig through time that he can use to finish off the Liliana, but that's not going to work. Not just yet. Going to take up here. There goes Volcanic Island. Pass the turn back. Both players empty-handed. Jones has a Jite. Merriam has nothing. Jones is tapping 4 mana. Let's make it 5. Another dig through time.
I think Ross drew pretty well over the last couple turns.
Didn't
but
draw as good as Kevin did.
Kevin has drawn a bit better.
Yep. Kevin's looking at 2 of them. Excuse me, 7 of them and taking 2 of them. One of them's a Jace. Another one's a Batterskull. Source of Plowshares there too. This is the power of dig through time, folks.
And Jason Batterskull are his 2 best tools in the spot.
Absolutely.
They're out of abrupt decay range, and each are capable of winning the game on their own.
Now you got to wonder what Ross's best draw is in this situation. Remember, he doesn't have a card like him to Torek in his deck.
His own copy of True Name Nemesis would be pretty solid.
He's just got to pass the turn back. Jones going to lead out with a Jace. That's going to resolve. We'll see if it's time to brainstorm or Fate Seal. It's going to be time to brainstorm.
And not a lot of work to be done with Fate Sealing here because Ross has so many fetch lands in play, unless Kevin is planning on going Ultimate with Jace, which he doesn't really need to do because he has Batterskull.
2 Stoneforge Mystics have been found. Merriam will draw a card. He'll pass the turn back, picked up a copy of Daze. Supreme Verdict to draw. Kevin's card's in a vacuum, more powerful than Ross's.
Yeah, I mean, when we got to the Liliana stage, especially when Ross's draw was Tarmogoyf, it felt like he had gotten the better end of it.
Yeah.
He was in a good position, but Dig Through Time, Snapcaster Mage was very, very good. The turn he found at the Council's Judgment. Kevin found some very fortuitous draws all in a row, and now it's hard to imagine that Kevin was without cards in hand 3 or 4 turns ago.
Yeah, it's crazy that we were in a top-decking war. It's definitely a top-decking war. It's hard to say who's favored there. Kevin definitely has the more powerful cards to draw, but he had to draw them immediately once Ross presented the Tarmogoyf.
Yeah.
Kevin thinking about casting a Ponder. Looks like he'll go with another Stoneforge instead. Just to shuffle the deck here. Wants to make sure he has enough creatures in play to make sure that Umazawa can connect potentially. Or always can put Batterskull into play. There is the Ponder now. Force of Will among the options here for Jones. Tree Nemesis might be too late now for Merriam too.
Yep.
Jones going to shuffle.
Kevin can just overpower it from here.
Yep.
And with Batterskull, he's going to be able to gain life or force Ross to not attack with his True Name Nemesis. And either situation is fine for Kevin.
And during that time, Jace will be getting to run wild.
Yep.
Pass the turn back. Merriam will draw a card now. It's going to have to be a doozy. Delver Secrets is the draw. Pass the turn back. He is less than enthused.
He knows the implication of this game, and he knew how close he was to get this to a game 3.
Yep.
And it's all a matter of cleanup now.
I think he played an excellent game to get to the point where it was at, and then he got outdrawn.
Yep. I also think he's behind a little bit in the matchup.
I think so,
I
too.
think Kevin's got the better end of it, 75 against 75.
I think the way that Kevin's deck is set up, it's good against Delver decks. I think that's part of the reason he played it this weekend.
Cheap removal spells, Stoneforge Mystic, cards like Supreme Verdict. He's got a robust game plan. He can handle it from a variety of angles.
Ross going to sacrifice a fetch land here. Bayou the weapon of choice. Merriam will draw a card. Oh, you can just pass the turn back. Looks like it was a Spell Pierce. Looks like it's time for Batterskull. Living Weapon trigger. Kevin going to get to work with these creatures now. Jones picks up a Spell Pierce for the turn. And as you said, it's crazy to think that at one point, both these players had no cards in their hand. Kevin now has who knows how many.
And at one point, it looked like Ross was favored in the mid game. But everything turned around so fast.
Yep.
Ross set up a very nice situation where it looked like he was a little bit ahead, slightly favored, the best he could do with his tools, and then hope that his draw steps against Kevin's over the course of the next couple turns would cooperate him. Just didn't work out.
A Ponder. And a passing of the turn there from Jones. Merriam going to sacrifice his fetch land as Jace did Fate Seal. So he'll get a Tropical Island out of the deck. See what Merriam's draw here is in just a moment. But he is certainly behind now. Take a draw step. It may have been a Tarmogoyf. Didn't get a great look. It's a Liliana of the Veil. A little late to the party. See if this even resolves. Looks like it will. Take it down. Jones going to play Vendilion Click on the end step. Wants to know what Merriam's working about, if there's anything that he needs to be concerned about.
It's probably very little.
Yep, very little indeed. Spell Pierce Daze, Underground Sea. Kevin very quickly says you can keep those. No interest in taking them. Take a draw. True name Nemesis. And if this game wasn't over before, it certainly is now, as Kevin will slide the equipment over there, come in with all of his creatures, take care of Liliana of the Veil with the Stoneforge Mystic. 7 damage will come across. Looks like there may be a pump, there may not be.
Yeah, Kevin knows the coast is clear, no abrupt decay. You can just go crazy.
Merriam down to 4. It'll be his last draw. It'll be his last draw step here. There's a little Fate Seal action. For Kevin, this was a really important tournament.
Yep.
He's had some difficulty in the standard portion of the Open Series, as most of the main events have been standard this year, and especially during Season 2. But he's done a lot of work in the Modern and Legacy Premier IQs of tournaments to keep his head above water. And now here with Legacy, the last main event Open of Season 2. He beats Ross Merriam in a very important match. He's on his way to the top 8. Kevin Jones will take care of Ross Merriam, 2-0. Jeskai Stoneblade will take care of Sultai Delver, and for Jones, number 1 on our leaderboard, a big, big win. He's in the top 8. Ross Merriam is not, and we'll see if Joe Lissette can make it in.
Sometimes, you know, you have all this jockeying for position, you have all this set up, and what you get down to is, let's each reveal the top 4 cards of our deck and see who gets the better end of it. And Ross drew pretty well from the spot he got himself into, but Kevin's draw steps were quite a bit better. And the game went from close to not close at all over the course of about 3 turns.
Congratulations to Kevin Jones. We will see him later today in